Parsha, we are introduced to the Yeser Makos, the 10 plagues that afflicted the Egyptians that finally forced them to allow the Jewish people to leave. So the first of the Makos is Dam, that the water turned into blood, and the water therefore could not be consumed. This was a phenomenon that occurred earlier. It was one of the signs that was given to Moshe, that he would be able to turn the water into blood. And the second Makkah is Svardeya, which is the fact that there was a plague of frogs that invaded the entire country and invaded even the homes. Rashi quotes the famous medrash that invaded even the ovens. The Tzfardim were Moser Nefesh, so to speak, to do the will of God, and that the later years, Hananiah, Mishoel, Azariah would emulate them. They made a kal v'chomer that if the frogs are willing to jump into the oven for God, then we are also willing to be consumed by fire and not to worship idols. So Rashi points out, again based on the Midrashim and the Gemara, that Dam and Svardeya were performed by the Chartumim of Mitzrayim as well. That somehow I don't know who the Chartumim are is a matter of discussion, but apparently Paro, in the ancient world, certainly even in the modern world, leaders have miracle makers, people whom they rely upon to do supernatural things. And so these Chartumim, whom we will meet later also, they were able to perform Dam and Svardeya. So therefore Paro said, you guys are not special. Why should I let you go? Because you can do Dam and Svardeya. I got Chartumim that can do Dam and Svardeya. So the question is, how could the Chartumim do Dam and Svardeya? How do you take a bucket of water and turn it into a bucket of blood? Or how do you take frogs that, millions of frogs should invade a certain area? So there are different opinions, because this goes to the nature of miracles itself. What do we call nisim? Because the truth of the matter is that if we look at what we call teva, nature, it itself is a miracle, if we think of it in those terms. So Rashi is of the opinion, and many of the Meforshim, that the Chartumim had certain powers. The powers kishuf, that there's such a thing in the world as magical powers, and that the Chartumim had those powers, and therefore they were able miraculously to turn water into blood and to bring frogs on Egypt. In Kinim already they ran into problems, Rashi says, because their magical powers existed over things in the water, but not on the land. They were limited, but there is such a thing as kishuf. The Rambam is famous for his denial of that. The Rambam says there's no such thing. And so the Rambam says it all is achizas einayim. It's all what mentalists and professional magicians do. And by sleight of hand, or by hypnosis, or by other natural means, they make you believe that this somehow is going to happen. And therefore, he says the whole thing is, in the immortal words of President Trump, fake news. Doesn't exist. We have in the Gemara many cases where the Gemara seems to be of the opinion that there are such powers. So it's interesting, the Rambam ignores all of those Gemaras. The Rambam Shita is that none of them are la halacha. They are opinions. And he's not necessarily bound by their opinion. And therefore he says it doesn't exist. And therefore he says this whole Dam Tzvardeya thing was only magic. And fake magic. And therefore it really didn't have an effect. In that he admits, though, that that's why Paro was not really convinced by these makos, because Paro thought also that it was only fake. He thought he has a better, they have better magicians. It's only until the Khartoumim will tell him, Etzba Elokimi, this is something that's beyond, there's no magician in the world that can perform this. So then Paro starts to take notice. But until then, he's also of the opinion that, it's all sleight of hand. It's all, there's a famous legend. The Rambam didn't believe in shadim either. He writes about it. So shadim are bodiless spirits that exist. The Gemara talks about them. And from the Gemara it appears that they felt that they were real, that there are such things. So there's a famous legend that when the Rambam wrote that there are no shadim, so the shadim had a convention, and they said if the Rambam says that we don't exist, people won't believe in us. And the only reason that we have power is because people believe in us. And if the Rambam's view will be adopted, so then we'll be out of business. So therefore they wanted to make a demonstration in the house of the Rambam. So the shadim attacked it. It was like a tornado in the house. All the shadim, they destroyed everything. So then the Rambam's son said to him, Pa, you see that there are shadim. Look what happened there. And the Rambam said to him, there are no shadim. But in heaven they're testing me whether I really believe there are no shadim. The legend is obviously not factual, but it illustrates the Rambam. That the Rambam is the extreme rationalist in all of these matters. And therefore he says, no matter what happens, it doesn't mean that it exists. None of this, there may be things that happen that we cannot explain. That could be. But it doesn't mean that there are these powers. And he says that is the basis for the rejection of Avodah Zorah, and that's what the Torah means, not to Al Tifnu Ela Ovos Ela Yidonim, and don't fall for any of these magical things, and don't fall for talking to the Mesim, for seances, all of that. That's all Avodah Zorah. It's not Lo Chein Nosan L'cha Hashem Elokecha. The Rabbanu Shalom made us that we shouldn't be influenced by these things. Nevertheless, I need not tell you that in the Jewish world there is great influence of these things, because of the fact that things do occur for which there is no rational explanation, and we're not able to deal with, so therefore we assign it to these types of things. So the Nisim in Mitzrayim, so the Rambam says that they were real Nisim. In other words, that the water did turn into blood. Not it was a trick that it looked like blood. And the Tzvardim were real Tzvardim, not a trick that made it look that way, etc., etc. But he points out that that's why Paro is so reticent in accepting anything that Moshe says, because Paro is of the effect that these things are all tricks. His Chartumim could do it. So, and he knows that his Chartumim are not real. So therefore he knows that that Moshe also, what he's doing is only trickstery, but it's not something real that he has to take into consideration. So this leads us into, I can't discuss it at length, but it leads us into an understanding of miracles generally. How do we understand miracles? But the Rambam understands miracles in a very a profound and one would say almost modern way. You know, I've used this example before. If you stand on the assembly line and watch the assembly line of automobiles, so they make a certain number of automobiles to order, and then they're making, right? So let's say there are 15, 20 automobiles in a row that are black in color. So the robot brings over black tires, black wheels, black upholstery, everything perfect. And then, because they had an order that day, there's coming an automobile that's yellow. And the robot, because it's computerized, knows, so it brings over yellow wheels and yellow upholstery and the fit to the yellow car. So if you're a person that's standing on the side and there are 15 blacks that go by, and then there's one yellow and there are 15 blacks that go by her again, and all you see are black and there was one yellow, so you say the yellow's a miracle. Because how did that happen? But you're not aware that it's built into the computer. That at this and this time, on this and this place, on the assembly line, a yellow car will come and you have to bring yellow wheels to it. So the Rambam defines miracles in that way. That, so to speak, Misheshis Yemei Breishis, there's a great computer. And in the computer was put in, there's going to be the Yasser Makos. They're going to come at this and this time, in this and this place, to this and this people. And that's the miracle. Huh?
Where's the Bechira?
What's Bechira got to do with it?
If everything is computerized. So
Everything's computerized. You have the right to choose what you want?
yes, but the choosing is changing the situation.
No, who can choose? You're not running the computer. The Bria is the computer, right? The Bore is the computer.
But what happened to you?
No, I'm not talking what happened to you. We're talking what happens generally. That's a different question. You're talking about whether Hashgocha Protis, that the Rambam goes into a different matter. I'm not talking about Hashgocha Protis, what's going to happen to you, which also is a question. It's not, but what's going to happen in terms of Nisim? So he says it like the Nisim in Tanakh. It was computerized, that Elisha should be able to make these Nisim. That this should happen. So then it's a question of time and place, not a question of the thing itself. And that's the basis of miracles. But that's the Rambam Shita, and he says it in many places. Naturally, it's not adopted by everyone. It's not even popular. I don't even think that it's well known. But that gives us an idea of the Eser Makos, of what the Rabboni Shalom did here in order to extricate the Jewish people from Mitzrayim. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash, Yomer Rotz HaKodesh Baruch Hu L'Zachar Yisrael, L'Ficha L'Chibah L'Hem Torah Mitzvah Shanemar,